A warm welcome to all of you once again. आप सबको मेरा नमस्ते. In this current lecture, we will start the chapter Surface Chemistry of our 12th standard. So first of all, what is surface chemistry? Surface chemistry is that branch of chemistry, that branch of science in which we are dealing with the nature of the surfaces and the phenomenon that occurs at the surfaces or at the interfaces. So it is that branch of chemistry in which we are dealing with the nature of surfaces and the phenomenon that occurs at the surfaces or the interfaces. And by having the knowledge of surface effects such as adsorption, heterogeneous catalysis and properties of colloids, we can discuss the different physical and chemical properties of the substances in more detail. And that's why the study of surface chemistry is not only important from academic point of view, but it has a wide applications in industry and in our everyday life. So now let's have a brief look upon the contents of the chapter, that what we will learn in this chapter. So in this chapter we will thoroughly discuss three main topics: adsorption, catalysis and colloids. Adsorption, क्या होता है adsorption? ये absorption नहीं है, adsorption है. Adsorption is the phenomena by which the particles of the substances are attracted and retained at the surface of the solid or a liquid solution. And that's how the particles of that substance has more concentration on the surface than in the bulk. Clear? So it is the phenomena by which the particles of the substances are attracted and retained at the surface of a solid or a liquid solution. So under this topic, we will discuss what are the main differences between absorption and adsorption, and then we will study about types of adsorption which are actually physical and chemical adsorption. So we will differentiate between physical and chemical adsorption, and then we will go through the mechanism of adsorption, adsorption of gases on the solids, and what are the main factors which will affect the adsorption of gases on solids, and at last we will cover applications of adsorption under the topic of adsorption. And then we will go through catalysis. What are catalysts? Catalysts are those substances which alters, which changes, which increase the rate of chemical reaction without itself being consumed in the reaction. And the phenomena by which the rate of reaction increases by use of catalyst, that phenomena is called catalysis. So here we will study about the classification of catalyst, which can be homogeneous or heterogeneous catalyst, and the phenomena is called homogeneous and the heterogeneous catalysis. Now what is homogeneous catalysis? In which the reactants and the catalyst are in the same phase. And in the heterogeneous catalysis, the reactants and the catalyst are in the different phase. For example, we have sucrose. We have sucrose and we are doing hydrolysis of sucrose. So sucrose, when added to water, then we add few drops of sulfuric acid also. So in this case, the solution of sucrose and the aqueous solution of sulfuric acid, both are in the aqueous phase, liquid phase. That is called homogeneous catalysis, in which the reactants and the catalyst are in the same phase. Now suppose we have formation of ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen. We require the catalyst iron here and molybdenum as a promoter. Now iron is a solid catalyst and nitrogen and hydrogen are in the gaseous phase. So we have heterogeneous catalysis, in which the reactants and the catalyst are in the different phase. So we'll discuss in detail about the homogeneous and the heterogeneous catalysis. Then we learn about the mechanism of heterogeneous catalysis, and then we'll start with enzymes. Enzymes क्या होते हैं? Enzymes are the biochemical catalyst produced in the living cells and catalyze the biochemical reactions inside the living system. So we'll thoroughly learn and understand the various characteristic features of enzymes and then the mechanism of enzyme catalysis. So these are the main subtopics under catalysis. And then we will discuss about colloids. Colloids क्या होते हैं? We know that solutions are of three types: true solution, suspension, and colloids. And these are the classification of solutions based upon the particle size. If the particle size is less than 1 nanometer, it is called true solution. If the particle size is more than 1000 nanometer, it is called suspension. And if the particle size is in between 1 to 1000 nanometer, then it is called colloid. So we'll discuss thoroughly about colloids in this chapter. Now colloids consist of two phases, dispersed phase and the dispersion medium. Dispersed phase are similar as that of solute and dispersion medium are similar as that of solvent of any solution. That means the component present in the less amount is called dispersed phase and the component present in the large amount is called dispersion medium. So we'll discuss about the classification of colloids based upon the physical state of dispersed phase and dispersion medium. We can also classify colloids based upon the nature of interactions between the dispersed phase and the dispersion medium. And we can also classify colloids based upon the particle size of the dispersed phase. तो वो हम thoroughly यहाँ पढ़ेंगे about the classification of colloids. And then we will cover preparation of colloidal systems, colloidal solution by different chemical methods, by electrical arc method, by baptizing method, and so on. Then we will purify the colloidal solution by the methods such as dialysis, electrodialysis, ultrafiltration, and so on. Then properties of colloidal solution. We'll discuss properties such as optical properties, which is Tyndall effect, Brownian movement, electrophoresis, electroosmosis, coagulation. So we'll discuss all these properties under properties of colloidal solution. Clear? And then we will cover emulsions. Emulsions क्या होते हैं? If the dispersed phase and the dispersion medium are in the liquid state, then that colloid is called emulsion. So we'll thoroughly discuss about emulsion here and the types of emulsions, which are actually oil in water and water in oil emulsions. So we'll differentiate between the oil in water and water in oil emulsions. And at last, in this chapter, we will cover applications of colloids in the different fields, in the field of industries, medicines, and in our everyday life. So these are the main contents of this chapter that we will discuss in this chapter. आप भी साथ साथ नोट करते रहना, क्योंकि पर्सनल नोट्स बहुत जरूरी हैं. You can take the help of book, take the help of your teachers from YouTube, but you should have your personal notes which will be very beneficial before any examination. ठीक है, तो आप ये नोट कर लो what are main contents of this chapter. And now we can start with the topic of adsorption. नोट करो, उतार लो. तो स्टार्ट करते हैं adsorption से. So let's start with the first topic of the chapter, that is adsorption. So how will you define what is adsorption? Adsorption is the phenomenon of attracting and retaining. Attract कर रहे हैं और retain कर रहे हैं. Retain मतलब बनाए रखना. The phenomenon of attracting and retaining molecules of the substance at the surface of a solid or a liquid. तो किसी भी solid या liquid surface पे कोई molecules substance के adsorb हो रहे हैं, attract और retain हो रहे हैं, और उससे क्या होगा? That will result into the higher concentration of molecules at the surface than in the bulk. तो उसका जो concentration, उसका amount है वो surface पे ज्यादा होगा एज कंपेयर टू द रिमेनिंग पार्ट ऑफ द सब्सटेंस, तो उसको बोल रहे हैं हम एडजॉर्प्शन। तो डिफाइन कैसे करेंगे प्रॉपरली? द प्रोसेस, द फेनोमेनन ऑफ अट्रैक्टिंग एंड रिटेनिंग मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ द सब्सटेंस ऑन द सरफेस ऑफ ए सॉलिड और ए लिक्विड, रिजल्टिंग इनटू higher concentration of the molecules of the substance on the surface than in the bulk, that is called adsorption। अब adsorption process में हमारा वो solid या liquid substance जिस पर adsorption हो रही है, that substance is called adsorbent, और हमारा वो सब्सटेंस जो एडजॉर्ब हो रहा है किसी भी सॉलिड या लिक्विड सरफेस पे, दैट सब्सटेंस इज कॉल्ड एडजॉर्बेट। क्लियर? एडजॉर्बेंट क्या होता है, एडजॉर्बेट क्या होता है? तो एडजॉर्बेंट क्या है? द सॉलिड और द लिक्विड सब्सटेंस ऑन द सरफेस ऑफ विच एडजॉर्प्शन ऑकर्स, दैट सब्सटेंस इज कॉल्ड एडजॉर्बेंट। और एडजॉर्बेट क्या है? दैट सब्सटेंस दैट गेट एडजॉर्ब on the surface of solid or liquid due to intermolecular attraction, that substance is called adsorbate, adsorbent, adsorbate। Clear? So that's about adsorption, adsorbent और adsorbate। अब आते हैं desorption। Desorption is the reverse of adsorption, that means the process of removing the adsorbed substance, process of removing adsorbed substance from the surface on which it is adsorbed. So the process of removing the adsorbed substance from the surface on which it is adsorbed, that process is called desorption। आपसे पूछते हैं एग्जाम में, बोर्ड एग्जाम में, what the role of desorption in the process of catalysis? इसका आंसर क्या होगा? It make the surface available again, it make the surface available again for fresh adsorption of reacting molecules, it make the surface available again for fresh adsorption of reacting molecules। That's the role of desorption in the process of catalysis। So that's about adsorption, adsorbent, adsorbent क्या होता है, adsorbate क्या होता है, and what is desorption। Now we will study about some examples of adsorption। इसको आप नोट कर लो, फिर हम स्टार्ट करते हैं examples of adsorption से। Let's now come to examples of adsorption। First example here is adsorption of gas by charcoal। So it has been found that many gases like hydrogen, carbon monoxide, chlorine, ammonia, sulfur dioxide, they get adsorbed on the surface of activated charcoal। So in this case, these gas molecules, they will act as adsorbate, and the activated charcoal, it will act as adsorbent। Clear? Second, adsorption of a dye by charcoal। So animal charcoal, now what is animal charcoal? When the bones of animals are calcined, calcined मतलब are heated in the absence of air, then we get animal charcoal। So when the animal charcoal is shaken with the solution of organic dyes such as methylene blue, then the solution turns colorless। ऐसा क्यों हुआ? Because the molecules of the dye gets adsorbed on the surface of animal charcoal and the solution turns colorless। तो इस केस में जो मॉलिक्यूल्स हैं डाई के, वो क्या है? वो एडसॉर्बेट है, और ये एनिमल चारकोल क्या है? वो एडसॉर्बेंट है। ठीक है। सिमिलरली द रॉ सुगर, जो शुगर बनता है, कच्चा शुगर बनता है इन द शुगर मिल, first of all they are not colorless, they are not white, they have some color, mainly brown color। So the raw sugar are passed over the beds of animal charcoal, and the animal charcoal will adsorb the color from the raw sugar and the sugar will turn colorless। So that's how the sugar are made colorless in the sugar industry by passing over the beds of animal charcoal. Third, we can say that adsorption of water molecules by silica gel. Silica gel क्या होता है? It is the amorphous form of silicon dioxide, amorphous and porous form of silicon dioxide, and silicon dioxide has the tendency to adsorb the water molecules. So we can say that the air becomes dry in the presence of silica gel because the water molecules get adsorbed on the surface of the silica gel. तो इस केस में वाटर मॉलिक्यूल्स क्या है? वो एड्सॉर्बेट है, और सिलिका जेल क्या है? वो एड्सॉर्बेंट है. सो दैट्स अबाउट द सम ऑफ द एग्जांपल्स ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन. नाउ वी विल स्टार्ट विद मैकेनिज्म ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन. ठीक है, तो इसको आप नोट करो. तब तक हम स्टार्ट करते हैं एड्सॉर्प्शन के मैकेनिज्म में, मैकेनिज्म ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन. Yes, now let's start with mechanism of adsorption. So adsorption is a surface phenomena. It occurs on the surfaces of solids and liquids. And how it arises? It arises because of unbalanced forces. Because of unbalanced forces acting on the surfaces of solids and liquids. That's the main reason behind adsorption, and that's how you can explain adsorption. और हमने वही लिखा यहां पे, इट अराइजेस बिकॉज ऑफ अनबैलेंस्ड फोर्सेस ऑन द सरफेसेस ऑफ सॉलिड्स एंड लिक्विड्स. अगर हम बात करते हैं एड्सॉर्बेंट के अंदर, इनसाइड द एड्सॉर्बेंट, देन ऑल द फोर्सेस एक्टिंग ऑन द पार्टिकल्स आर म्यूचुअली बैलेंस्ड. वहां तो बैलेंस हो गए, बट व्हेन टॉक अबाउट द पार्टिकल्स ऑन द सरफेसेस, देन द पार्टिकल्स आर नॉट सराउंडेड by the atoms or the molecules of their kinds on all the sides, and thus we can say that the particles on the surfaces, they possess unbalanced or residual attractive force, and that unbalanced force, that net inward force, that is responsible for the attraction and for retaining particles of the adsorbate on the surface. तो ये जो नेट इनवर्ड फोर्स है ना, ये जो अनबैलेंस्ड फोर्स है ऑन द सरफेसेस ऑफ सॉलिड्स एंड लिक्विड्स, वो रेस्पॉन्सिबल है फॉर द अट्रैक्शन एंड रिटेनिंग पार्टिकल्स ऑफ एड्सॉर्बेट या पार्टिकल्स ऑफ द गैस ऑन द सरफेस. क्लियर? सो दैट्स द मैकेनिज्म ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन. जो नेट इनवर्ड फोर्स है, जो अनबैलेंस्ड फोर्स है ऑन द सरफेस of the solids and liquids, that is responsible for attraction and retaining particles of the adsorbate on the surface. And this net adsorption, it will increase with the increase in the surface area, increase in surface area per unit mass of the adsorbent. तो जितना surface area ज्यादा होगा किसी भी solid या liquid surface का, उतना ही एड्सॉर्प्शन, द एक्सटेंट ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन बढ़ेगा, इंक्रीज कर जाएगा. क्लियर? द एक्सटेंट ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन इंक्रीजेस विद द इंक्रीज इन सरफेस एरिया पर यूनिट मास ऑफ द एड्सॉर्बेंट एट ए गिवन टेम्परेचर एंड प्रेशर. सो दैट्स हाउ यू कैन एक्सप्लेन द मैकेनिज्म ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन विद डायग्राम दैट द नेट इनवर्ड फोर्स, the unbalanced force or the residual attractive force that is responsible for attracting the adsorbate particles on the surface, and the extent of adsorption increases with the increase in surface area per unit mass of the adsorbent. Clear? तो हम ऐसे एक्सप्लेन करेंगे मैकेनिज्म ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन को विद वेल लेवल्ड डायग्राम. अब हम पढ़ते हैं टाइप्स ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन, जहां हम कवर करेंगे फिजिकल एंड केमिकल एड्सॉर्प्शन. उनमें मेन डिफरेंसेस क्या है बिटवीन द फिजिकल एंड केमिकल एड्सॉर्प्शन. तो आप इसको नोट करो. फिर हम स्टार्ट करते हैं टाइप्स ऑफ एड्सॉर्प्शन. Yes, types of adsorption. So based upon the nature of the force of attraction between the molecules of the adsorbate on the surface of the adsorbent, we have two types of adsorption. Physical adsorption, also known as physisorption, and chemical adsorption, also known as chemisorption. Clear? तो ये डिफरेंशिएशन किस बिहाफ पे है? Based upon the nature of the force of attraction between the adsorbate and adsorbent molecules. First point क्या है? The physical adsorption, it arises because of weak van der Waals forces. So we can say that the force of attraction between the adsorbate and adsorbent molecules, it is weak van der Waals force of attraction. In case of chemical adsorption, proper chemical bond formation occurs between the adsorbate and adsorbent molecules. So it arises due to chemical bond formation. Second point में आते हैं. It is not specific in nature. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? That all the gases are adsorbed on the surface of the adsorbent to some extent. That's why we say here it is not specific in nature. Chemical adsorption में it is highly specific in nature. That means only those gas molecules are adsorbed on the surface of the adsorbent which have proper chemical bond formation with the adsorbent molecules. So they are highly specific in nature. Third, physical adsorption is reversible in nature. That means the adsorbate molecules which are adsorbed on the surface of the adsorbent can easily be dissolved. यहाँ पे dissolve कर सकते हैं. We have the process of desorption easily. It is irreversible. In case of chemical adsorption, it is irreversible. That means the process of desorption cannot occur easily. Fourth, it depends upon the nature of the gas molecules, and more easily liquefiable gases are adsorbed readily in case of physical adsorption. Now what are easily liquefiable gases? Those gases which can be easily converted to the liquid state. So those gases are adsorbed more readily in case of physical adsorption. Chemical adsorption में it also depends upon the nature of the gas, and the gases which can react with the adsorbent, they will show chemisorption. तो यहाँ पे प्रॉपर केमिकल बॉन्ड फॉर्मेशन बनना चाहिए, तभी होगा प्रोसेस ऑफ एडसॉर्प्शन. नेक्स्ट, द एंथैल्पी ऑफ एडसॉर्प्शन इज लो इन केस ऑफ फिजिकल एडसॉर्प्शन. नाउ व्हाट इज एंथैल्पी ऑफ एडसॉर्प्शन? द अमाउंट ऑफ हीट एनर्जी इवॉल्व्ड व्हेन 1 mole of the adsorbate is adsorbed on the surface of the adsorbent. The amount of heat energy evolved when 1 mole of the adsorbate is adsorbed on the surface of the adsorbent, that heat energy is called enthalpy of adsorption. So in case of physical adsorption, the enthalpy of adsorption is low. It is of the order of 20 to 40 kilojoule per mole. ये नेगेटिव साइन में आता है because it is exothermic in nature. So delta H is negative. It is order of 20 to 40 kilojoule per mole. In case of chemisorption, the enthalpy of adsorption is high. It is of the order of 80 to 240 kilojoule per mole. Clear? So that's the first 5 comparison between the physical and chemical adsorption. इसको आप नोट कर लो, स्क्रीनशॉट ले लो, उतार लो. फिर हम देखते हैं नेक्स्ट कंपैरिजन बिटवीन द फिजिकल एंड केमिकल एडसॉर्प्शन. उसको मैं नोट करता हूं क्योंकि अगर मैं बार बार लिखूंगा तो उसमें काफी टाइम वेस्ट हो जाएगा, लेक्चर काफी लंबा हो जाएगा. तो तब तक आप इसको नोट करो, समझ लो. फिर हम देखते हैं नेक्स्ट कंपैरिजन बिटवीन द फिजिकल एंड केमिकल एडसॉर्प्शन. Yes, next point of comparison between the physical and chemical adsorption. In case of physical adsorption, we can say that it usually occurs at low temperature, and it will decrease with the increase in temperature. Why? Because only weak van der Waals forces exist between the adsorbate and adsorbent molecules, which can be easily disturbed with the increase in temperature. So it occurs at low temperature and will decrease with the increase in temperature. In case of chemical adsorption, it occurs at high temperature because proper chemical bond formation occurs between the adsorbate and adsorbent molecules. So it requires some energy in the form of heat. So it occurs at high temperature and will increase with the increase in temperature. Next, no appreciable activation energy is required in case of physisorption. Now, what is activation energy? The minimum amount of energy required by the reactant molecules to get converted into product. That is called activation energy. The minimum amount of energy required by the reactant molecules to get converted into products, that is called activation energy. So in case of physical adsorption, no activation energy is required. But in case of chemical adsorption, high activation energy is required. Next, the physical adsorption results into multi-molecular layer on the adsorbent surface under high pressure. So there is no proper bond formation, only weak van der Waals force exists between the adsorbate and adsorbent. So it can result into multi-molecular layer on the adsorbent surface. But in case of chemical adsorption, it results into unimolecular layer, or we can say that it results into monomolecular layer. So in case of chemical adsorption, only one layer exists between the adsorbate and the adsorbent. Only one layer of adsorbate over the adsorbent surface. So that's about the points of comparison between the physical and chemical adsorption. We can add one more point, that the physical adsorption will increase with the increase in surface area. Similarly, the chemical adsorption will increase with the increase in surface area. तो दोनों केस में with the increase in surface area, the extent of adsorption will increase. So that's a comparison between the physical and chemical adsorption. So in the today's lecture, we covered the main contents of the chapter, and then we thoroughly discussed about adsorption, desorption, mechanism of adsorption, and then the types of adsorption, which are physical and chemical adsorption, also known as physisorption and chemisorption. In the next lecture, we will cover the adsorption of gases on the solids and the applications of adsorption. So that's about the today's lecture. See you in the next lecture. Till then, thank you and namaste.